I woke up that morning to an unexpected sound, wedding bells. But these weren't distant church bells. They were ringing right on my farm. At first, I thought I must still be dreaming, but as I stretched and took a sip of my coffee, I realized the sound was very real. Something was happening, and I wasn't a part of it. As I stepped onto my porch, I nearly dropped my mug at the sight before me. My land, my private property, had been transformed into an extravagant wedding venue. Rows of white chairs lined up perfectly, leading to a floral arch positioned at the end of a pristine red carpet. A lavish buffet table overflowed with gourmet dishes, and servers in crisp uniforms weaved through the well-dressed guests, offering hors d'oeuvres and champagne as if they belonged there. Elegant laughter and cheerful chatter filled the air, creating a scene straight out of a high-end bridal magazine. Except, this wasn't some luxurious event hall. This was my farm, and nobody had asked for my permission. At the center of it all, orchestrating the madness with the confidence of a queen overseeing her court, stood Linda, the town's reigning champion of entitlement. The very same Linda who had once tried to negotiate a friend discount on my fresh produce at the farmer's market. The same Linda who had thrown a fit when I refused to let her kids ride my horses for free. And now, here she was, throwing an entire wedding on my land, uninvited, as if she owned the place. My grip on my coffee mug tightened. I took a deep breath, exhaling slowly, trying to process the audacity of it all. Trespassing was one thing, but throwing a full-scale, high-society event without so much as a phone call? I knew one thing for sure, this wasn't going to end well for her. And I was about to make sure of it. 1. Discovering the unauthorized wedding. Furious, I stormed toward the scene, dodging guests who gave me odd looks as if I was the intruder. Even a waiter had the audacity to offer me a shrimp cocktail. Pushing past the crowd, I approached a woman with a headset, who barely spared me a glance. "Excuse me, what is happening here?" I demanded, my voice firm with restrained anger. "Sir, if you need assistance, please speak with the event planner," she replied curtly, clearly too preoccupied with her checklist to acknowledge the growing storm in my expression. "Event planner? I own this farm," I thundered, my patience worn thin. The woman's face paled as she slowly looked up, realization dawning in her eyes. Just then, Linda waltzed over as if she were floating on a cloud of self-importance. She was dressed like royalty, her lavender gown shimmering under the afternoon sun, a champagne flute delicately held between her fingers. "Oh, it's you," she scoffed, taking a slow sip of her drink. "What's the problem?" My jaw clenched as I tried to keep my composure. "The problem? You're hosting a wedding on my property without permission. You set up a full-scale event, invited guests, catered food, and didn't even bother to ask me." Linda sighed dramatically and waved a dismissive hand. "Relax, it's just for a day. My niece needed a beautiful venue, and your farm was perfect. You should be honored." She gave me a condescending smile, as if she was doing me a favor. I could feel the heat rising in my face. The sheer entitlement was staggering. I took a deep breath, suppressing the urge to grab the nearest plate of hors d'oeuvres and launch it into the air out of frustration. "Linda," I said, voice low and measured, "this is private property. You trespassed. You invaded my land, invited over 100 people here, and took it upon yourself to act as if you owned the place. And you didn't even have the decency to ask?" She rolled her eyes. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's just a bunch of open land. You weren't using it. Besides, I did try calling you," she added, flipping her hair over her shoulder. I pulled out my phone. "Funny, I don't see any missed calls." I held the screen up for emphasis. Linda waved her hand dismissively again. Details. The point is, the wedding is already happening, and it's far too late to change anything now. So why don't you just go back to whatever farm things you do and let us enjoy the day?" She smiled, as if she had just solved the entire issue with her sheer charm. That was it. That was the moment the last shred of my patience snapped. If Linda wanted to act like she owned my farm, she was about to get the full farm experience. 2. The perfect payback, unleashing the goats. Linda's smugness pushed me over the edge. She thought she could use my land, my property, without asking? Fine. I decided she was about to experience the full farm life. I turned and strolled back to the barn, where my 3 best troublemakers were waiting: Bessie, the ever-hungry goat; Thor, the fearless leader; and Peanut, small but mighty. I grinned and unlatched the gate, giving them a knowing nod. "Go get your snacks, boys." The trio trotted out with purpose, their eyes locking onto the extravagant buffet table like seasoned warriors heading into battle. Within seconds, the peaceful wedding turned into an absolute spectacle. A collective gasp rang out. "Oh my God! A goat is eating the wedding cake." Bessie had climbed onto the table, burying her face in a beautifully decorated, three-tiered masterpiece. She ripped through layers of sponge and frosting, leaving a sugary disaster in her wake. Guests scrambled backward, some shrieking in horror while others helplessly watched as their fancy celebration became a barnyard free-for-all. Meanwhile, Thor, my most ambitious goat, had taken a particular interest in the champagne station. With a determined gleam in his eye, he rammed straight into the ice bucket stand, sending expensive bottles flying and shattering across the ground. One unfortunate guest, trying to salvage a glass, was instead greeted by Thor, who promptly knocked it from his hand and trotted away victoriously. Peanut, the smallest but the most unpredictable of the bunch, leaped onto the dance floor, zigzagging between guests and expertly evading all attempts to catch him. At one point, he somehow managed to get tangled in a string of decorative lights, turning himself into a moving, glowing spectacle. The DJ tried to maintain control, but that effort ended when Peanut jumped onto the booth, sending equipment crashing in a spectacular explosion of sound. By now, the guests were in full retreat, their heels sinking into the grass as they desperately tried to avoid the rampaging goats. A bridesmaid attempted to stop Bessie, but the determined goat simply headbutted her aside, causing her to tumble backward into the remains of a fruit platter. Another guest tried shooing Thor away from the dessert station, only to receive a sharp hoof to the shin for his trouble. Linda, her perfect hair now a chaotic mess, screeched in rage. "Call them off. Call them off right now." I leisurely leaned against a fence post, arms crossed, watching the beautiful disaster unfold before me. My voice was calm, deliberate, and laced with the same smugness she had shown earlier. "Oh, Linda, it's too late to change anything now. The party's already happening." 3. When the police arrive. By the time the police showed up, the wedding was a full-blown disaster. The once pristine venue was in ruins, trampled decorations, spilled food, shattered glass, and the unmistakable scent of farm life lingering in the air. Linda, now covered in cake frosting, grass stains, and dripping with misplaced elegance, spun her own version of events the moment she saw the officers. "Officer, thank God you're here," she wailed, her voice dripping with faux distress. "This man released wild animals into my niece's wedding. They destroyed everything. He ruined the most important day of her life. You need to arrest him immediately." The officer, a sturdy man with sharp eyes, turned his gaze toward me. "Sir, is this true?" I crossed my arms, exhaling slowly to keep my patience. "Well, here's the thing, officer. This is my farm. I never gave permission for this wedding to happen. These people trespassed onto my land, set up an entire event without my consent, and expected me to just deal with it. So, I simply let my farm animals enjoy the unexpected buffet." Linda gasped dramatically, clutching her pearls. "You liar. How dare you twist this around? This is harassment." My niece, she turned, searching for sympathy, but most of the guests had already started slipping away, desperate to avoid being linked to this disaster. Before she could spin more lies, a familiar voice rang out. "Oh, Linda, save it." Mrs. Thompson, my ever-reliable neighbor, stepped forward, brandishing her phone like a courtroom exhibit. "I recorded the whole thing. Every entitled word you spewed. Every single moment of you treating this farm like your personal playground. Every order you barked at the staff. And guess what? It's all on video." Linda's face paled instantly, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. The officers exchanged a glance, one sighing deeply as if he already regretted taking this call. "Ma'am," one of them said, adjusting his belt, "you're going to need to come with us for questioning." "What?" Linda screeched, her voice going up several octaves. "No, wait. This isn't over. This is outrageous. I am the victim here. Do you know who I am? I will sue. I will." Her rant was cut short in the most poetic way possible. With one last dramatic step backward, her expensive high heels failed her, slipping on a treacherous, fresh pile of, you guessed it, goat droppings. Splat. For a moment, silence. And then, a slow, muffled snicker from the crowd. Another. Then, like a ripple effect, full-blown laughter erupted across the wedding party, the police officers struggling to maintain professionalism as their shoulders shook with restrained chuckles. Linda, now sprawled in humiliation, tried to salvage what little dignity she had left, but it was too late. Her lavender dress, once the pinnacle of elegance, was now smeared with mud, cake, and, well, the natural consequences of farm life. Mrs. Thompson, ever the opportunist, took a photo. "Oh, This is definitely going in the town newsletter. Might even make the front page. She smirked at me. Think I should add a caption? Karma comes calling? 4. A wedding worth remembering. As Linda was hauled away to the police car, flailing and still screeching about lawsuits, I turned back to the wreckage. The guests had mostly scattered, and those who remained were either too embarrassed to make eye contact or too busy wiping goat drool off their outfits. Then, from the far side of the mess, a young woman and a man approached me. They looked nervous, but not in the entitled way Linda had been. Instead, they carried a kind of hesitant sincerity. We are so sorry about all of this, the bride said, wringing her hands. We had no idea she did this. She told us she had booked the venue properly. We would never have agreed to this if we had known. Her groom nodded. Yeah, we should have questioned it more, but well, Linda's persuasive, and honestly, we were just so caught up in the wedding stress that we didn't think to double-check. I studied them for a moment, watching as they glanced around at the goats still lazily munching on leftover decorations. Unlike Linda, they looked genuinely remorseful. And then it hit me. This was supposed to be their day. Not Linda's. Not the guests. Theirs. And they had just watched their wedding crash and burn. Literally, considering the overturned chafing dishes still smoldering near the buffet. I sighed. Tell you what, if you still want to get married today, I'll help set up something small in the back pasture. It won't be fancy, but it'll be peaceful. You can have a quiet moment without all of this nonsense. Their eyes lit up, their relief immediate. Really? You'd do that? The bride asked, clasping her hands together. Yeah, I said, already waving toward Mrs. Thompson and a few of the remaining guests. We'll clear a spot, grab some wildflowers, and set up something simple. You don't need all this extravagance to have a real wedding. With some help, we quickly cleared a small area behind the barn. We propped up some wooden crates, set a few scattered wildflowers around, and within an hour, the couple stood hand in hand under the evening sky. It wasn't the high society wedding Linda had forced upon them, but it had something far more meaningful: peace, love, and sincerity. The officiant, who had surprisingly stuck around through the chaos, stepped forward and led the short, heartfelt ceremony. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the fields, the couple exchanged their vows, completely unfazed by the small group of remaining guests or the goats curiously watching from a distance. When they kissed, the remaining guests erupted into cheers. Even Mrs. Thompson wiped a tear from her eye. It was, in the strangest way possible, one of the most beautiful weddings I had ever witnessed. After the ceremony, the bride approached me again. Thank you. You didn't have to do this. I shrugged. Maybe not. But I figured something good should come out of today. She smiled, shaking her head. Well, it did. And we'll never forget it. As the final guests departed, I stood for a moment, taking in the aftermath. The land would need some serious cleaning, but honestly, it had been worth it. Linda had been put in her place. The couple had gotten their wedding, and my goats had feasted like kings. Mrs. Thompson strolled up beside me, arms crossed, a satisfied grin on her face. Well, that was the most entertainment this town has seen in years. I chuckled. Not exactly how I planned to spend my day, but I suppose it worked out. She held up her phone. Oh, it did. And the whole town knows it now. That video is already going viral. I sighed, shaking my head. I don't even want to know. She smirked. Let's just say Linda might want to move to another state. As I turned toward the barn, Bessie trotted up beside me, licking frosting off her snout. I scratched her behind the ears. You did good today, girl. You really made a statement. She let out a pleased bleat, completely unbothered by the day's chaos. I envied her ability to live in the moment. With one last glance at my now goat-conquered wedding venue, I walked toward my house, feeling more at peace than I had in a long time. Justice had been served, lessons had been learned, and at the end of it all, love had still won. And if Linda ever dared to set foot on my land again, well, let's just say my goats and I would be ready. Lessons learned from the story. This story serves as a powerful reminder that respect for others' boundaries is not optional. No matter how entitled someone may feel, they do not have the right to take what is not theirs. In life, whether it's personal space, property, or even kindness, respect should be given first before it can be expected in return. Linda learned the hard way that selfish actions often lead to embarrassing consequences. Trying to manipulate and exploit others for personal gain will always backfire in the end. On the other hand, the newlyweds showed us that when faced with unexpected obstacles, true happiness isn't about luxury or grandeur. It's about genuine love, sincerity, and making the best of every situation. Their impromptu wedding in the pasture turned out to be more memorable and meaningful than anything Linda had planned. A meaningful message for everyone. Entitlement and arrogance will always be met with resistance, but kindness, respect, and adaptability will open doors where none seem to exist. This story is a testament to the idea that karma is real, and life has a funny way of delivering justice to those who think they can take advantage of others. So, remember to always ask permission, respect others' hard work, and know that sometimes, goats and a little bit of patience are the best revenge. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video to show your support. Subscribe to Story Precious for more incredible, real-life stories like this. Hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest uploads. We bring you engaging, thought-provoking, and meaningful stories that will inspire, entertain, and sometimes even teach a lesson or two. Thank you for watching. And remember, always ask permission before throwing a wedding on someone else's farm.